Hello, this is Astor. It's a Vizsla and Beagle mix. I did this mostly in charcoal pencil, and I'm going to be taking you through the drawing process. As usual, I have a simple sketch done with a graphite pencil, and then I start working with charcoal pencils, well sharpened charcoal pencils. For this portrait I used Gioconda Kohinoor soft charcoal pencils. I'm starting with the eye, putting down some of the darker values. And the pupil of the eye is probably one of the darkest details on the drawing. The eyes on a pet portrait are just as important as eyes on a human portrait, probably the most important and expressive part of the drawing. Tortillon is a very useful tool here to blend and make the eye look smoother. The eye is round, so I need to shade it so it looks like a round surface, and you should always try to get enough contrast to make this reflection in the eye stand out. If you feel that the reflection in your reference photo is too complex or you don't really know what's going on, you can always simplify it a little bit. But like I said, the key is to have enough contrast so that that light area really stands out. And the best way to achieve those highlights is to reserve the white space, just not cover it with a pencil, instead of trying to erase later or maybe cover it with gouache or a white gel pen. I don't really like those methods. You can see that I started working on the ear, drew the outer line, and I'm making these relatively short strokes to try to suggest the appearance of the fur. As I always say, with portraits of furry animals, the length of the fur varies, and you have to keep that in mind when drawing animals. So in some areas it will be longer, somewhere it will be shorter, so you need to keep that in mind. And you also have to keep in mind the fact that you have to make these strokes in the direction in which the fur grows. So as long as you do that, you will achieve a nice realistic looking fur. And this looks pretty rough right now, but once I cover that with a charcoal pencil, I'm gonna blend it with a brush, and it's all gonna get softer, it's gonna get more volume and value, and it's just gonna look better. But this process requires patience, and it has to be done. Just keeping the same direction and roughly the same length of my strokes, and also going over some of the areas again to make them darker and to make these strokes more dense, or the hairs more dense. And now I grabbed a bristle brush and I'm going over those charcoal strokes and blending them. I've often talked about this before, but brushes are very good for blending if you're trying to draw fur, because they allow you to keep some of that texture while at the same time softening the lines in making everything appear smoother and making the hair appear more dense, because you can't draw every single hair. So the trick is to lay down these strokes and then blend them with a brush. And already you can see that I'm achieving something that looks far more realistic. This process as well requires a little bit of patience, and you also have to change the direction in which you blend with the brush. So with drawing fur, the direction of your strokes is always important, whether you're drawing or blending. I could just work on the outer edge a little bit with a tortillon. And a tortillon that has charcoal on it can also be used for drawing. You can make some very light strokes with it without actually using the pencil. Here I added a little bit of value to the bottom, to the lower part of that ear, because it's getting less light, so it's a lot darker. And the upper part of the ear is a lot lighter. You can see that I'm going over the blended areas and adding a little bit more texture here and there. So now I'm moving on to the nose. And I think that this particular breed of a dog has a nose that doesn't really stand out that much from the rest of the fur. It's not that much darker. I'm working on the other eye. The reflection in the other eye appears a little bit different, but the same rule applies. Just making sure that I have enough contrast for the reflections or the highlights to stand out. You can see that I'm doing a lot of drawing without actually using the pencil, just spreading the charcoal around, sometimes with tortillons, sometimes with a brush. I just want to make that area a little bit darker without actually having to use the pencil, because the fur is really short there. So first I want to see what I can do with just a brush, and I can add the texture a little bit later. And also I have to shade the dog's face to show its topography. I don't want to have it look flat. So that's going to be another challenge. Showing the topography of the face, the volume of the face is extremely important, whether you're drawing animals or people. You want the portrait to feel like it's popping out of the paper, and I'm hoping to achieve the same effect with this dog portrait as well. So I'm drawing the fur around the nose, making a lot shorter strokes here. But that also needs a little bit of blending with a brush. My reference photo is in the top right corner, and that's also where my iPad was, where I was looking at the reference photo. And the reference photo was decent, but some of the lighting was a little bit confusing. And also I decided to do a vignette, so I'm mostly going to show the dog's head and a little bit of the neck and chest. I'm also going to have to draw the collar as well, but I'll simplify some of these details. You can see that I'm working with a black colored pencil. I often combine a black colored pencil with a charcoal pencil, and I find that as long as you know how the two mediums behave, you can actually combine them pretty well. Now I'm working on the mouth and drawing these gums. This is an area that has some darker tones and a lot of contrast and some highlights. So I have to go in with a fairly sharp charcoal pencil and draw areas of very dark value. Here the tongue kind of bends over one of the teeth, one of the canine teeth. That's why it has such a strange shape. So I'm going to have to worry about that as well. The tongue is going to have a little bit of a weird shape because of the way it's sitting on top of the teeth. And I'm softening that with the tortillon a little bit, but I think I'm gonna have to clean some of these highlights with an eraser a little bit later. So I'm drawing some of these folds or whatever they are in the tongue, trying to make the surface of the tongue appear a little more realistic. My footage is a little bit blurry here, sorry about that. So first I picked up a kneaded eraser and shaped it into a tip to try to lift up some of the charcoal and draw some of the highlights, but for more precision I can also use this pencil eraser, which is a Kohinoor pencil eraser which can be sharpened. I can also use it to pull some of the highlights on the tongue as well. He's been working on the nose again, trying to add some shading and some texture to it. Like I said, the nose isn't quite as dark as you'll find with a lot of dog breeds. And I'm trying to shade the area around the nose as well. This portion under the upper jaw. You can see how useful the brush is when working with charcoal, especially when you're drawing fur. Now I'm going lower down the neck and the chest a little bit, but I'm going to have to draw that collar. I can't really see all of the details there, so I'm going to have to simplify it a little bit. And also I don't want to make it too distracting. I'm mostly happy with the head and the eyes, and even the nose looks pretty good now. I feel like the drawing is starting to pop out of the paper, and you can feel like the nose is protruded. Yeah, the drawing feels like it has volume now. I just have to finish up these lower parts under the lower jaw and around the collar. Making just a little bit longer strokes here. I think that the fur is a little bit longer, a little bit fluffier here, so I have to take that into account. And doing the same thing on the other side as well. And just blending it with a brush. Here I decided to use the black color pencil to add some more detail to the tongue. I felt like it needed a little bit more texture. And now I grabbed that pencil eraser again to pull some highlights on the jaw and try to make it stand out a little bit more, and clean up some of these whiskers. If around the area between the nose and the eyes you can see a white line, that's not a mistake, that's a scar. I left that there intentionally because the dog has a couple of scars on the forehead. That was in my reference photo, and I asked the owner about it, and they said that I was supposed to include that as well. So that's fine. And I'm working on that collar. Finally. Just had to enlarge my reference photo a little bit, zoom in a little bit. And I'm gonna shade the sides of it a little bit darker and the top part lighter to create more contrast, because I think the collar has some metal parts. I'm also drawing some fur under it. These Kohinoor charcoal pencils can actually be sharpened pretty well, considering how soft they are. You can see that I have a very nice tip. But the thing is that lately I've been working with woodless charcoal pencils more and more, and I find that they break even less and they really last very long. You can create many pieces with just one woodless charcoal pencil, which is great. It's minimal investment. I just have to draw the rest of the fur here and then blend it and sort of fade it towards the edge, because I'm trying to create a vignette portrait. So that's what I'm going to be doing. And I'm going to be doing that with a brush again, as before. It's just that I have to shade the area under the chin and under the collar a little bit darker because that area is receiving less light, and clean up the edges on the collar a little bit as well. Again, my footage was a little bit blurry for a while there, but now that it refocused, you can see a lot of that texture that I've been working on, and I hope you like it. You can see that there's quite a bit of detail on the portrait. I'm also using the Stutilian to soften the texture wherever I feel like the lines are too visible. And doing the same thing with the brush. The owner told me that it was very difficult to get these reference photos because the dogs just wouldn't stand still. But this one looks pretty nice. So the portrait is almost done. I'm just gonna put down a small signature here after I've cleaned up the drawing a little bit with a kneaded eraser. And that's it. I hope you enjoyed this narrated video. Thanks for watching.